Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 9 of the series. Chapter 92, 87. The Greatest Demon in the World, 1. Chapter 92, 87. The Greatest Demon in the World, 1. Princess, Marquis Ueming has guards with him. What should we do? Throw the head to the guard and let him bring it back. Tell the real Marquis Haoming that we can have a marriage alliance, but send Huang Yan's portrait over. If my brother likes it, then we can have a marriage alliance. Otherwise, forget it. The maid quickly wrapped the head in a black cloth and left the palace. Someone else came to deal with the body. Xia Xiaosu found Hu Xian. She knew that this vixen had a special way of contacting her brother, so she asked worriedly, "Is he all right?" "Of course," Hu Xian said. "Can he do anything?" A smile appeared on Xia Xiaosu's lips. She sat under the moonlight and hugged her knees as she looked at the moon. People have joys and sorrows, and the moon has its ups and downs. This matter is difficult to complete since ancient times. I hope that people will live long and share the moon for thousands of miles. I'll wonder if he is also looking at the moon. Which great scholar wrote this? Hu Xian was stunned. The vixen was very interested in the scholars, especially the talented scholars. She had to make a memorandums and collect more information. Even if she didn't need it, it could benefit the sisters. "It's him," said Xia Xiaosu. Hu Xian was instantly annoyed. Seducing Xia Ji. That cold block of wood. She still remembered standing on a big rock and blowing the flute all night until her mouth was numb. "How's the preparation for that thing coming along?" Xia Xiaosu suddenly asked. Hu Xian was stunned for a moment before she reacted and whispered, "It's better not to." "Get ready," said Xia Xiaosu. "Your brother will kill me if he finds out." "I will succeed." Xia Xiaosu bit her lip. "Get ready." The ancestral dragon didn't give her enlightenment. She was still an ordinary princess, but in this chaotic world, what was the use of being ordinary? She told herself, "I'm not even afraid of death. What else am I afraid of? What else is there to be afraid of?" Hu Xian looked at her determined eyes and pursed her lips. "I'll prepare it then." "You have to ask him first if you want to use it." "You must ask." "All right." "You really want to ask?" "All right." She had already made up her mind not to ask. "You must ask, or I won't give it to you," Hu Xian said. Xia Xiaosu thought about it and decided to trick the vixen into doing it first. She nodded sincerely, so sincerely that it was impossible for her to lie. Hu Xian finally believed him. Thus, the vixen was deceived by the little princess. She turned her head and suddenly realized that this little girl had really grown up a lot. If it were anyone else, they would only make one choice when faced with Marquis Haoming's request. That was to endure. He kept enduring it. Groveling and bending my knees to endure. They felt that enduring was the best choice. If they endured, the other party would give them what they wanted. Taking a step back would be like the vast sea and sky. No, it was a bottomless abyss. Xia Ji took a step back. He dodged a pillar of fire that shot into the sky. The rain fell violently, and blood flowed everywhere. The deep mountains in the eastern suburbs of the north bank of the great river were like an abyss, with earth fire rolling and corpses strewn everywhere. He had not killed enough. Black Halberd was not full yet. Dorj and Kuming were ahead of him. He took a step forward. He turned into a demonic shadow and shot out. Wherever the 18-foot-long halberd passed, trees, boulders, rain, and soldiers were cut down. The two monks were frantically running away. In Great Light Temple, Kuming, who was known as the Son of Heaven of the Sun Palace, was speechless. What else was there to fight? He couldn't defeat them without using magic tools. He still couldn't beat them. He had already used the lotus stem just now. The fire lotus flower was a magic weapon of the Great Light Temple. As long as he blew on it, every petal of the lotus flower would turn into a flame and float towards the other party. This flame was Buddha fire. As long as one had a trace of sin, they would be burned. And the result? In the end, they all touched their backs and took out a string of prayer beads. A golden swastika flew out and smashed the petals away. There was also a petal that luckily landed on his body. Although a petal might not be able to do anything to an expert of this level, it could still cause him pain, forcing him to stop and resist. In the end, she didn't even stop. After chanting a Buddhist hymn, the petals fell off. Dorje also used his magic tool, which was the black prayer beads from the Great Han Temple in the snow region. This prayer bead was not something that was merciful, but the condensation of evil. The source of this evil was the fear of the people of the snow region towards a local monster called Lu. To put it bluntly, it was a dragon demon. It was an extremely long black snake that could swallow a person's soul. It was said that it could even make people unable to enter reincarnation. When Dorje used it, he suddenly turned around to launch a sneak attack. The prayer beads turned into a giant snake and pounced at Prince Shenwu. However, Prince Shenwu took out a string of prayer beads and turned it into a 100-foot-long Buddha's hand. With a slap, he sent the giant black snake flying. He and Dorje had also used quite a number of magic tools. People like them would never bring only one magic tool. They even gritted their teeth and risked the risk of damaging their magic tools to use the fire lotus flower and dragon demon prayer beads a second time. In the end, the other party used the prayer beads one after another without any heartache or emotion. Streaks of golden swastikas were casually slapped out by him. Moreover, Ku Ming also noticed something else. The reason why they didn't kill them seemed to be because they were fishing for more people. He and Dorje did not dare to run into the city. If someone died in the city, the karma would be counted on them, and all the blessings they had come to cultivate would be gone. At this moment, in a small village, the rain did not affect this place. It was clearly night, but the chirping of birds in spring was very annoying, making people unable to sleep early. The bright moon hung high in the sky. Under the moonlight, a young girl was sitting on a stool at the entrance of the village, holding a scripture in her hand and reading it softly. She nodded and shook her head, reciting the words, but she was very happy. She had a delicate and graceful appearance, but the only flaw was that there were hundreds of white hairs mixed in between her black hair. She should be a beautiful beauty, but she had a somewhat weathered temperament. The children around her were also listening to her reading with great interest. On the other hand, the villagers were discussing animatedly. This girl from the Ning family went out to study Confucianism in her early years. Now, 10 years have passed and she has become a big girl when she comes back. From the way she talks, she is even better than the old gentleman in the town's private school. It's a pity that he's getting old before his time. His white hair has already risen, and he doesn't look to be in good health. That's right. She's not as strong as us who do farm work every day. Although this girl has long legs, her butt is small. I'm afraid it won't be easy to give birth to her. It's better to read less. Your body is weak. The voices of the villagers and women were not concealed. The young girl was called Ning Xiaoyu, and the villagers called her Little Yu. At this moment, her brows were filled with peace, and she was not moved by these words at all. She had been back for many days, and now she really wanted to stay in such a simple and pure village for a long time. In the words of her teacher, this was sharpening her sword. When the sword was tempered, it was about to be dipped into ice water. The battlefield was filled with blood and fire, while the mortal world was like ice and water. She only felt her body and mind relax. Many thoughts kept colliding in her mind, producing many new and more interesting thoughts. The flowers of March had already given birth to many red flowers, like the blazing sun at the end of the village road that burned everything and destroyed everything. She looked at the flying bird and the new flower. There were many things that she had yet to understand. For example, how to live this life. She had a very firm belief. However, there was still no firm path. Gulp. A horse carriage sped past, but as soon as it passed, it turned back. Someone in the carriage lifted a corner of the curtain, as if he was carefully observing the girl who was reading to the country bumpkins at the village entrance. Then, he gave a few instructions. The two warriors in embroidered clothes rushed forward. Ning Xiaoyu was stunned when she saw who it was. The warrior said, "My family's mister invites young lady for a chat." "That's all for today," she replied. The village women had long been dozing off from listening. Moreover, they were also afraid of the big shots sitting in the carriage and dressed in luxurious clothes, so they hurriedly said, all right, all right. Sister Yu has talked enough today. Let's go home. Therefore, the children in the village dispersed. Ning Xiaoyu was not afraid and walked to the car. I have a big favor to ask of you, miss, the men in the carriage said. The young girl was stunned. Someone actually wanted her to do something big here. What is it? Her accent was a little rustic, making her look like a real peasant woman. Besides the world's greatest demon, the world is still bright and clear, said the men in the carriage. Ah. Tell me, what is it? The men said, tomorrow morning, a young man will probably pass by here. That young man is the most disloyal, unjust, and unfilial person in the world. He is also the source of the chaos in the world. If he lives, the people will be in misery. If he dies, the world will be peaceful. He invited the girl to approach him and said that he wanted to go to the imperial capital. Unfortunately, he was afraid of the bandits on the way. He begged him to take you along the way. He would not refuse. Then, on the way, he would encounter many chivalrous men who sacrificed their lives to stop him. He only hoped that the girl would stab him at the critical moment. Whether it succeeded or not, the girl would be the greatest contributor to the peace of the world. I see that you also read the Confucian classics, so you must be someone who understands righteousness. Life is what I want, and righteousness is what I want. The two cannot be combined, because they give up life and choose righteousness. Are you willing to do this? What? Ning Xiaoyu was stunned. Why would such a terrifying demon bring me along? Why could I stab him at the critical moment? The man in the car glanced at her face and smiled deeply. Young lady only needs to imo that you can do it. The young girl was a little hesitant. She turned her head to look at the village. The men in the car followed her gaze and said, this is an act that will be famous for thousands of years. I will naturally subsidize the villagers. As he spoke, a heavy bag was thrown out of the car. It was slightly open on the ground, and inside was yellow gold. The young girl smiled. She bent down and revealed an ecstatic expression like a country woman seeing so much gold and silver. Then, she grabbed a piece of gold and bit it hard. Then, she held it in front of her eyes and looked at it. A faint canine tooth mark appeared on the gold surface, and she smiled even more happily. The men in the car also smiled. This money was enough to buy hundreds of slaves. It was enough to give it to a village woman who only knew some principles. He gave her interest and also gave her a name. Thank you for your trouble, miss. The young girl took the money and turned around to return to the village. The martial artist in embroidered clothes moved closer to the window. Sir, what if she doesn't do anything after receiving the money? The man in the window laughed. He did not hide his voice too much and said, now that the war is in chaos, would she dare to blackmail me when she sees so many cavalry martial artists around me? Ning Xiaoyu, who was walking in front, paused for a moment. Her thin shoulders trembled a little. The man in the window smiled and lowered the curtain. The carriage left the village. Chapter 93, 88. Listen to my chanting, be my son. Chapter 93, 88. Listen to my chanting, be my son. In the vast forest, Prince Yu chased after the two heavens. He ran and chased at the same time, and he had already gone down for an unknown distance. King Kong, let's split up and run, Ku Ming said to Dorj. It meant that whoever he chased after would be unlucky. If you dare to split up, I'll bring out my great magic tool right now, Xia Ji shouted. Ku Ming was speechless. Dorj was speechless. And a great magic tool. Your Highness, how many things of Thunder Sound Temple have you inherited from Mount Meru? Xia Ji did not lie to them. The python robe that the Maitreya Kasaya had transformed into still hid the 3,000 worlds and the 1,008 realms of Dharma. The 3,000 worlds, in particular, had not been used since it was made. It must be bigger than the 5 elements Buddha mountain. He mainly wanted to see who else was on the other side. If he could attract a bunch of experts, he would wait for more people to come. After all, it would take him a month to make a magic tool of the level of the 3,000 worlds, and every time he used it, he would use it less. Therefore, he unintentionally used a high-end technique called pulling monsters and releasing AoE in his previous life. The prince and the two monks ran for a while. He really felt that running was meaningless. "Your Highness, what exactly do you want?" Ku Ming began to actively communicate. "I remember you scolded him," Dorj reminded him in a low voice. Ku Ming immediately understood. He apologized as he ran. "This penniless monk was wrong. This penniless monk shouldn't have called your Highness the number one heretic who is disloyal, unjust, and unfilial." As soon as he finished speaking, he felt the prince behind him increase his speed. "Why is he running even more fiercely?" Ku Ming asked. Dorj was puzzled. The Vajra thought for a moment and said, "Why don't you slap yourself twice?" Ku Ming said, "This poor monk, Amitabha. Dorj, emptiness is color, color is emptiness. Fanning is not fanning is fanning. Hurry up and fan." Ku Ming thought that if he was here alone, he might really slap him. However, there was a fellow Taoist beside him, so it was inappropriate to slap him. Therefore, he said decisively, "This penniless monk will never slap you." He ran for a while. Xia Ji also felt bored. "Stop. If you don't stop, I'll use a great magic tool," he shouted angrily. The two monks did not stop. "What if he really uses it if we don't stop?" Dorj asked. "This penniless monk thinks he's probably playing tricks," Ku Ming said. "What if he didn't play any tricks? If you didn't cheat, why didn't you use it earlier?" Ku Ming's eyes flashed with wisdom. "I once read in an ancient book that the Dharma artifacts of the Thunder Sound Temple are divided into Buddha Wheel, Buddha's Hand, Buddha Mountain, and Buddha Kingdom. They are fourth-grade Dharma artifacts. His Highness used Buddha Wheel and Buddha's Hand, so the remaining Dharma artifacts in his hands are at most Buddha Mountain. Buddha Mountain is only 1,000 feet tall. If you and I burn our blood essence, we might be able to escape. Why don't I know? This penniless monk reads a lot of books." Amitabha. Seeing that the two monks were still not stopping, Xia Ji took out the 3,000 worlds. Dorj suddenly fell silent for a moment and said hurriedly, "Is the one with 3,000 prayer beads Buddha Mountain?" Ku Ming didn't answer. He smiled bitterly and then suddenly stopped. Dorj had already flown out. Seeing this, he immediately ran back and stood with Ku Ming. The two monks had very high positions in the Buddhist League. Their status in the 20 heavens was enough to explain a lot. But now, they stood side by side and looked at each other speechlessly. "No," Ku Ming explained. "The one with 3,000 crystals isn't the Buddha Mountain. It's the Buddha Kingdom in the palm. Even if we burn our blood essence, we won't be able to escape." Dorj was already numb. The two monks saw the reddish-black demonic shadow fly over. After it landed, it revealed the appearance of the prince in the python robe. The smell of blood and fire wrapped in dense demonic chi shook the surroundings. Xia Ji stabbed the big dark heavenly halberd into the ground and looked at the two monks quietly. Ku Ming sighed and said, "Your Highness, the world is in chaos now. The wind and clouds are turbulent, and the calamity is coming. No matter who it is, they are all chess pieces that cannot be controlled. Your Highness and I have our own camps. Please don't take offense." He finally understood that if this Prince Shenwu really wanted to kill them, he would have done so long ago. However, he really did not know what this prince wanted to do. "Amitabha," Dorj put his palms together and said, "Same here." "Listen to my chanting," Xia Ji said. Ku Ming was speechless. "I'll only recite Buddhist scriptures," Xia Ji replied. The two monks looked at each other in confusion. "Put down your guard," Xia Ji said. "If the bottle is full, how can we pour more water into it?" Xia Ji of the two monks had their own obsessions in their hearts. How Ku heard my sutra. Communication can improve one's learning and very obsessed with Zen, so I've always liked to talk about scripture monks. If I wasn't talking about the scriptures, the two monks WC immediately discovered it, wouldn't they? Ku Ming thought about it carefully and didn't find any flaws. He turned his head to look at Dorj, wanting to see if the secret guardian of the great cold temple in the snow region had anything to add, but Dorj had already said, "Okay. Your Highness, are you not lying?" Ku Ming hurriedly added. "My word carries weight," Xia Ji said. The two monks really couldn't think of any harm in listening to a prince's chanting. If it weren't for the scriptures or soundwave attacks, they would have noticed it immediately. Xiaji glanced at the two monks. The two monks' mental defenses were almost flawless. Dorj was a little weaker because he had broken through them before, but the other son of heaven could hardly find any delusions in his heart. It was unrealistic to use Dipankara Dhyana to break through delusions, so they could only rely on themselves to let down their mental defenses. Thus, he imprinted the spiritual imprint of the 3 lifetimes Buddhist dhyana into his voice and slowly began to chant. After the time for an incense stick to burn, he recited the scripture 3 times. The seed was planted in the heart of the guardian of the secret trace. Dorj finally realized that he had fallen for the Tao, but he did not feel resentment. Instead, he felt a great sense of awe because he felt the spirit that was as vast as a river. That spirit was like a Buddha walking in the human world. He suddenly understood that the reason why His Highness had so many thunder sound monastery prayer beads might not be because of the inheritance. Dorj sighed. He looked at the Sun Palace Emperor beside him and knew that Kuming hadn't sensed the mark yet. He didn't remind him and just waited quietly. The handsome monk was very vigilant. He did not dare to let down his guard at all, but he knew that a reckless Vajra like Dorj would definitely let it go. Therefore, he moved his lips and transmitted a message, "Vajra, is there a problem with this scripture?" Dorj thought that he should share such a mysterious spirit with his fellow Taoists. This was a great kindness. However, if he deceived his fellow Taoists, it would be a lie. However, between the great kindness and the lie, he chose the former. "Your Highness is selfless," he transmitted. "I only feel that my Zen cultivation has improved a lot." Another incense's time passed. Kuming, the son of heaven of the Sun Palace, had already embarked on the path of converting to Xiaji. A spiritual mark had been planted in his heart. His eyes revealed a hint of confusion and resentment as he turned his head to look at the stealth King Kong. Dorj looked at him, put his hands together, and recited, "Amitba." "Good, good. P.S. Be my son" was a joke from a pirate named Whitebeard, who liked to say, "You're very awesome. Be my son." For those who don't know, just in case there's a drama, this section is free. Chapter 94, 89. 5 Aristocratic Families, 6 Eras. Chapter 94, 89. 5 Aristocratic Families, 6 Eras. After trying, he realized that he couldn't scold Xiaji anymore. Even if he did, he would feel guilty. To mortals, guilt was nothing more than guilt, but to people of the 10th realm like them, it was fatal. This kind of fatal feeling might not be obvious usually, but at the critical moment of cultivation, it would suddenly appear and trigger the inner demons, causing chaos. In a more serious case, it would cause one's cultivation to regress as if one was sailing against the current. Dorj and Kuming were both monks with strong mental defenses. Because of their strong mental defenses, the mental imprint in their hearts could not be removed. However, spiritual imprints were also divided into stages. In the later stages, he would definitely convert like the Fox King Huaixin. In the early stages, it was the preaching on the imperial capital's star observation platform. Those martial artists who had been sown would develop a sense of recognition. Dorj and Kuming were both in the early stages. Xiaji had only planted a seed in their hearts that could not be removed and was destined to grow. Fortunately, the two monks realized that this spiritual imprint was not an evil spirit, but a righteous Buddha spirit. Otherwise, the two monks would not have obeyed even if they had to fight to the death. Letting go of this was actually beneficial to the cultivation of the two monks. Kuming put his palms together and said, "Your Highness is really amazing. You are born with wisdom and walk like a Buddha. You can do whatever you want without being tainted by dust." It was really something that no one had ever seen or heard of. Today, when I see that there are people like Your Highness in the world, I also know that there is no such person as Your Highness in the world. Amitba. The stealth King Kong glanced at Kuming and felt that this fellow Taoist was really good at talking. He said, "This penniless monk thinks so too." "Tell me about the aristocratic families and the emperor," Xiaji said. "How old do you think the aristocratic families are, Your Highness?" Kuming sighed and asked. "A 1,000-year-old family," Xiaji replied. Kuming couldn't answer directly, nor could he refuse to answer, so he said slowly, "This penniless monk has read a lot of books and saw an interesting division of eras. 1,000 years is near ancient times, 3,000 years were the Middle Ages. 3,000 years ago, it was ancient times. About 15,000 years ago was ancient times. About 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, it was the primordial era. And in a time so far away that it could not be traced back, there was still the primordial era. In these countless years, countless things have happened. The waves wash away the sand, and the stars are like the sea. However, there will always be sand that piles up into mountains in the river of time. In the deep sea, no matter how unshakable, no one can see it. After saying that, he was silent for a moment. This penniless monk is only living in the present. I don't know what happened in my previous life. I don't know where I will go in my next life. I have only lived for more than 20 years now. Many of my cultivation was obtained through enlightenment. However, I usually like to read and explore. I often think about it and have some guesses in my heart. If I really tell you, how much do you think I know? Yes, there are still some small secrets about the city and the land, but I can't tell you any more. If I tell you, I might suffer the consequences of my death in my next life. If your Highness insists on telling me, I can only die. You're a smart person, Xia Ji said. I'm not smart, Ku Ming said frankly. Smart people die quickly. Xia Ji tilted his head and looked at Dorj. He. Reckless King Kong is the real smart one. Dorj hurriedly said, don't say that this penniless monk is not smart. No matter how smart I am, my Zen heart was almost broken by your Highness's words. Your Highness is the one with true wisdom. Amazing. Why don't you say that I'm the same now? Ku Ming asked. Amitabha. Xia Ji looked at the two monks and finally understood. No one who had reached a certain level was a fool. If you heard something stupid or saw something stupid, don't be surprised or take it seriously. You were just plain dumb. What did the stealth Vajra teach me? He asked again. Duoji hurriedly said, I wouldn't dare. This penniless monk brought the dragon demon guide out of the great cold temple in the snow region on senior brother's orders. This is because the fifth prince has come to invite me, and above me is the fifth prince's biological mother, concubine Zhen. Consort Zhen's surname was Zhou and her name was Zhen. The reason was so great that Shixiang couldn't refuse. As for the rest, this penniless monk really doesn't know. Monks are devoted to Zen and don't ask too many questions. Monks don't lie. If you say it, you say it. If you can't say it, you won't lie. Xia Ji thought of the 5 great clans, Su, Wu, Zhou, and Lu. Then Zhou Zhen was from the Zhou family. Thinking about it carefully. Didn't the 4 concubines correspond to the 9 princes and princesses? He and Xia Xiaosu were the Su family. Gu Chen and Xia Ji belonged to the Wu family. The 5th prince and the 8th princess, Xia Qingxian, belonged to the Zhou family. The 2nd princess, Xia Yun, and the 3rd prince were from the Lu family. The former 6th prince was from the Shen family. However, Ku Ming's distinction between the 6 ancient worlds was worth pondering. If the timeline could really be extended to this extent. In that case, the 9 dragons competition for the heir was not an ultimate goal at all, but a small goal. It could not even be considered a small goal. But if the timeline could really stretch that long. There really are these things that I don't know if they can still be called humans. Then they were definitely not unscrupulous, but they were restrained. Whether it was strength or realm, they might be restricted. Otherwise, it would not be such a peaceful human world, but another scene. This was because they could achieve their goals through another method. Xia Ji's mind was fast, and he had grown very quickly in these successive events. At this moment, he had made many speculations. He looked at the Son of Heaven in front of him and saw that the handsome monk was also looking at him quietly. Both of their gazes were rather deep. Once they met, they roughly knew what the other party was thinking. What do you say about the Crown Prince's defeat at Fenglang Pass? Xia Ji asked again. The Emperor's orders are tacitly approved, Dorj said frankly. This poor monk is just a knife. Xia Ji didn't ask which family. In any case, it was most likely one of the 5 families. Even if he knew now, he couldn't do anything about it. Moreover, the handsome monk couldn't say it out loud. He couldn't say it out loud. It would be foolish of him to ask a question that currently didn't have much value. At present, the two monks were just seeds planted with spiritual imprints. It would take some time for them to germinate, bloom, and bear fruit unless someone could replace him with a spiritual imprint that was far superior to his. However, he would be aware of this replacement. These two monks weren't ordinary monks, so they would be fishing if they went back. If there were people in Great Light Temple or Great Han Temple who were far superior to him, they would discover the spiritual imprint and erase it. At that time, he would be measuring the depth of the water in this world. He pondered for a moment. He then thought of the Fox King Huaxin's words about the 3 revolutions in the world of power. He suddenly had a feeling that, this flower called the world was slowly blooming. It was not impossible to ascend to the sky in one step and enter the extraordinary realm. Perhaps the time had not come yet. Therefore, something seemed to be suppressing everything and pressing him down, preventing him from stepping from the 9th level to the 10th level in one step. On this day, if he didn't allow it, no one was allowed to go up. How many more? Xia Ji suddenly asked. A lot, said Ku Ming. Many of the 20 heavens could come. In addition, the failure of Vajra and I will make them use even more power. This power could be a magic tool or a Xian formation. Anything is possible. I know. What will happen if you go back? It's fine if I lose, Ku Ming said. I'll return to Great Light Temple to cultivate the Zen technique again. This penniless monk is the same. I'll return to the Great Han Temple now, said Dorje. Go ahead. Ku Ming and Dorje looked at each other. They knew why His Highness had let them go. It was very simple. If His Highness did not die, they would be on his ship sooner or later. Therefore, there was no need to thank him. The two monks respectfully said, Amitba. After some thought, Dorje took out the black prayer beads called Dragon Demon Guide. Although this item is precious, I will give it to your highness. Ku Ming thought that it might be more fitting to have his spiritual artifacts taken away, so he endured his heartache and took out the fire lotus flower. Chapter 95, 90. Meeting Ning Xiaoyu. Chapter 95, 90. Meeting Ning Xiaoyu. Xia Ji put the fire lotus flower of Great Light Temple and the Dragon Demon Guide of Great Han Temple into the dark gold python robe. Although they could not be nurtured, they could be used at critical moments. One more magic tool meant one more possibility. He looked at the great dark heavenly halberd again. The vicious weapon had already swallowed a lot of blood against Gui Fang and Nangong He, and it had swallowed even more blood in this battle. At this moment, as he looked over, there was a fetal movement that was the same as his heart rate. It was as if the vicious soldier treated him as its mother and was mischievously imitating his heartbeat. But it was not enough. It wasn't time to give birth yet. He put away the magic halberd, and the unknown beast face armor was obviously inferior to this vicious soldier. Xia Ji had quietly stored it in the space of the dark golden python robe. After doing all this, he heaved a sigh of relief. The pain from the intense battle finally returned to his body. When he saw the stream, he lay down by the stream and scooped up a handful of cold spring water with both hands. He splashed it on his face and then rubbed it back on his black hair. He wiped his hands and saw that his fingers were covered in blood. It turned out that he was really covered in blood, but it was someone else's blood. Xia Ji swam downstream for a while and found a quiet place. He took off his armor and changed his dark gold robe into a scarf before washing it in the water for a while. He had gained a lot of insights from this battle and needed to digest them. In the battle with Tianzi, he had comprehended his own mystic style, the god-slaying flying knife. Although it was not perfect, it had already taken shape. His essence, spirit, and soul were already complete. The only thing missing was a trace of opportunity that came from his heart. This opportunity was fleeting. If he grabbed it, he would grab it. If he couldn't, he would just wait. The gods were divided into true gods and outer gods. His spirit was a true god. The Buddha was an outer god. He comfortably soaked in the spring water and watched the blood wash away. He looked up at the sky and reached out to grab it. Heavens, how high is it? He asked without any rhyme or reason. How thick is the ground? How vast is time and space? He fell silent. His body and mind were not one with heaven and earth. If you obey, you will die. Rebellion is the way to live. Life needed to be lived in the present, and he needed to eat, drink, and pee. Although there were many people who would encircle him, and he did not know when the storm would come, Xiaji still disguised himself a little. His dark gold python robe had turned into an ordinary dark gold robe. In the next village, he ate a bowl of noodles with scallion oil and a top-notch toppings. Then, he hired an ox cart. Bowls of golden haystacks. The coachman was going north. He didn't want to talk to anyone, especially strangers. However, Xiaji threw a silver ingot to the coachman. The coachman immediately treated him like a boss. Looking at the material of the young man's clothes, he immediately understood. Perhaps this was a frustrated noble son. As for why he was disappointed, it was either money or women. Or maybe. He couldn't think straight. He did. Therefore, the coachman rubbed his hands and smiled apologetically. Where are you going? Head north. Take a ride and enjoy the scenery. When you reach a place you want to come down, you can come down. All right. The coachman was stunned for a moment before he suddenly became happy. He thought to himself, how did I come across such a good thing? I must burn a high incense stick and recite Amitabha. I'm really lucky today. Ning Xiaoyu split the gold. Her adoptive mother and the villagers who had taken care of her for many years had received a lot. Giving only the gold to her adoptive mother would bring disaster, but it was a blessing to share it all. She told the villagers that she was leaving again. The villagers patted their chests and said that they would take good care of her adoptive mother. After that, Ning Xiaoyu took a bath and changed her clothes. She left a strange letter for her mother, saying that if anyone came looking for her, she should give the letter to them. Then, she came to the village early to wait. When it was almost noon, she heard the sound of wheels. The voice came from the north to the south, breaking the silence of the world. She looked south. Under the spring light, an ox cart carrying hay came from the end of the road. The driver was an old man, and there was a burly youth in the car. He was wearing a dark gold coat and had a withered grass in his mouth. He was lying on the haystack with his legs crossed and his head raised, looking at the sky as if he was in a daze. The ox cart had no intention of stopping. Instead, it passed by the small path beside the village. However, the young man felt something and turned to look at the girl who was sitting at the entrance of the village in a daze. The girl happened to look at him. The young man looked at her face and was stunned. Then, he sighed softly and turned around, his back facing the young girl, not looking at her. Hey! Ning Xiaoyu shouted. The young man pretended not to hear him. Ning Xiaoyu's interest was piqued, and she called out in a rustic voice, "Little brother." The young man waved his hand and the ox cart stopped. He sat up and asked, "What is it?" "Little brother, please give me a ride," said Ning Xiaoyu. "Where to?" "My family lives in the north, in the direction of the imperial capital, but it's chaotic and I can't go there. I'm afraid I'll encounter bandits." "Little brother, do you want to go in that direction? If you do, give me a ride. It doesn't matter how far it is." "Thank you." After saying that, Ning Xiaoyu looked at the young man eagerly. The young man smiled. "Are you going to wait for me here? I can give you more money." "Are you going?" Ning Xiaoyu asked calmly. "I'll go." "Little brother, are you going or not? Then wait for me. I'll take my bag." With that, Ning Xiaoyu ran back to the village to get her luggage. It couldn't be too fake. She couldn't wait here with her luggage, right? Watching her receding figure, the old man driving the carriage leaned over and whispered, "Young master, this girl is not bad. Her legs are long and her face is beautiful. It's just that her buttocks are a little small. It's not easy to give birth to her." Xia Ji could guess that the old man was up to no good when he heard this. He was speechless. The old man saw that he did not speak, so he said, "Young master is a great benefactor. I've been there before. Women are just like that. If you can't get them, you're a fairy. If you get them, you're a grain of rice in your mouth or a mosquito's blood on the wall. There are plenty of fish in the sea. Why do you have to be one-sided with a flower?" The old man thought of his past and began to show off. Xia Ji roughly understood what the coachman was thinking, but he had no intention of explaining. Instead, he just listened. The fatigue from the previous fierce battle was also recovering in this daily routine. The opportunity that came from him seemed to be close. The old man kept talking. He looked up at the sky. Sky blue. Yunbai. Under the clouds, the long country road was covered with red flowers and green grass. His heart became calm. He didn't use any dhyana techniques, but he was also extremely peaceful. Not long after, the young girl returned. Carrying a bundle, she climbed onto the haystack of the ox cart and looked at the young man with familiarity. "My name is Ning Xiaoyu." "What's your name, little brother?" "Xia Ji," the young man said with a smile. Ning Xiaoyu was stunned. She obviously didn't expect this person to be so straightforward. "I didn't use a fake name because no one would know my real name." "But you just directly said your name. Do you have any experience in the martial world?" "You're the divine martial prince, the most disloyal, unjust, and unfilial demon in the world." Chapter 96, 91. I want to ascend to heaven, is it along the way? Chapter 96, 91. I want to ascend to heaven, is it along the way? Ning Xiaoyu couldn't ignore Xia Ji and immediately reported her name. Xia Ji looked at her. A young girl who looked very similar to his mother had appeared on the road that he had to pass through and had to be taken by him. He glanced at Ning Xiaoyu's chest. "You lecher," the young girl said. "It's exposed," Xia Ji replied. Ning Xiaoyu lowered her head and saw the tip of the dagger in her arms. She pressed it down quietly. The ox cart slowly moved forward in the spring light. The old man driving the cart hummed a tune. Suddenly, he slapped his head and said, "Hey, young master, why does your name sound the same as the prince who blocked the invasion of the foreign races in the north?" "I am him," Xia Ji said frankly. The old man was stunned for a moment before he started laughing. He laughed until he was out of breath. "You are a noble, but don't tease this old man. Moreover, impersonating the name of the imperial family will cause a big problem. Moreover, I heard that this seventh prince has a bad reputation. Anyway, many people say that he is a great demon, disloyal, unfilial, and unjust. There is no good in impersonating him, right?" He talked for a while, but no one paid attention to him. The old man felt quite embarrassed, so he stopped talking. On the ox cart, the young man and young woman looked at each other. Xia Ji closed his eyes. The girl in the same car as him was most likely an assassin, which meant that his whereabouts had been exposed, or he had been cast to the side. It was just that such a stupid assassin had a face that was similar to his mother's, even though his blood qi and true qi were very ordinary. It was really hard to say what to say. He could roughly guess what the other party was thinking. She wanted to mess up his heart. However, the other party probably would not have guessed that this would fulfill his heart. The opportunity in his heart was perhaps just missing this opportunity. One of the most hated things in his life was being separated from his mother and not being able to fulfill his filial piety. Although this girl was not his mother and he would not treat her the way he treated his mother, it was still a touch and an opportunity to complete his state of mind. In order to prevent this stupid assassin from doing anything stupid, Xia Ji said before resting, "One closed my eyes to rest. I didn't really fall asleep." Ning Xiaoyu was speechless. Afraid that she didn't understand, Xia Ji emphasized again, "One like to kill people in my dreams. Don't come close." Ning Xiaoyu was still speechless. Ning Xiaoyu nodded and said, "If you want me to sit far away, I'll leave some space for you to sleep more comfortably. Just say it. Why are you beating around the bush?" As she spoke, she sat far away. Xia Ji was also puzzled. This stupid assassin didn't know his identity and still dared to speak to him like this. He had already laid his cards on the table, so why couldn't he shock the tiger? He crossed his arms and fell into the haystack. It was a wonderful feeling. The young girl's voice suddenly sounded in his ears. "Little brother, why are you so kind and want to give me a ride?" "You look like my mother," Xia Ji said frankly. Ning Xiaoyu widened her eyes and was stunned for a long time before she said, "I'm only 18. Xia Ji reached into his pocket and took out a painting tube. This was one of the paintings that the national master had drawn for Lady Jdue. He gently pushed the painting tube over. "Look carefully." Ning Xiaoyu curiously opened the tube and took out the scroll painting. She carefully spread it open. In the painting, there was a beautiful woman with long hair dancing in the wind. She was as graceful as a swan, as graceful as a swimming dragon, as gentle as the waves, and as dusty as the dust in her stockings. She looked like a fairy from heaven. Ning Xiaoyu looked at her for a while and felt that she was indeed very similar to herself. Her facial features and eyebrows seemed to have been carved out of the same mold, but she was really old-fashioned. She did not know how to dress up and had never worn a dance dress. However, when she looked at the woman in the painting, she finally saw her appearance after dressing up. As if she was looking at a mirror, she touched her cheek and said happily, "Aya, this is really beautiful." "She's already dead," Xia Ji said softly. Ning Xiaoyu's body trembled and her smile disappeared. "Don't say any more." "How far is the town ahead?" Xia Ji asked loudly. "Young master," the old man said. "We can arrive tonight. We can enter the city. This is a big city." Xia Ji put the painting back into the painting tube and said to the girl, 111 get off there and drop you off there. Let's go our separate ways. You and I are not on the same path. As he spoke, he took out a bag of gold and threw it out. It was a way to satisfy this stupid assassin's lie in his own heart. A dozen gold taels in exchange for an opportunity was worth it. He looked up at the clouds. The clouds opened. Like the gate of heaven. As for this girl, it was enough for her to be on the same path. Black Fox King Slaughter had already run all the way. Ku Jian chased after her for a while. Along the way, there would be warriors running out from time to time, shouting at her, "Evil and evil, everyone must kill them." She was helpless. She wanted to change back to her original appearance and then hide quietly. However, the monk from Great Light Temple kept chasing her and did not give her a chance at all. As a result, she only slept for more than 10 hours in the past half a month. The monk was still energetic and shouted from behind, "Your Highness, please return the Saraira." There is no Saraira in killing. She couldn't change back to her fox form. He couldn't use his demonic aura either. She cursed the monk hundreds of times in her heart, but she still had to grit her teeth and run south. As she ran, she had to pretend to be calm and collected, shouting from time to time, "I'm on my way, I won't lower myself to your level." Chapter 97. Chapter 97, 91. I want to ascend to heaven, is it along the ways? Chapter 97, 91. I want to ascend to heaven, is it along the ways? It was not that His Highness did not give her a trump card, but most of the 800 men of sacrifice and the 800 men of sacrifice token had already died. There were too many enemies. However, Ku Jian was very happy. He didn't expect that he would be able to chase Prince Shenwu to such an extent. In the process of running, he felt that he had already run to the peak of his life. After this incident, the world would definitely spread the news that Prince Shenwu, who defeated Guifang's frost giant, was chased by monk Ku Jian for 10 days and 10 nights and did not dare to turn back. Thinking of this, he hurriedly chanted a few sutras to suppress his competitive heart. Then, he said like an eminent monk, "Your Highness, please return the Saraira." Killer felt bitter in his heart, but his voice maintained a faint tone. "I didn't bring any Sarairas." "Your Highness must have brought it, or else you would have told me long ago," Ku Jian said. Killer cursed Tyrant 100 times in his heart and said indifferently, "One said I didn't bring it, so I didn't bring it." Killer's eyes darkened. He wanted to kill Tyrant 100 times in his heart. A monk and a fox quickly ran towards the north bank of the river. Dawn. Many horses galloped in all directions. The news of the 7th prince assassinating the emperor was also spread by these horses. Along with the news, there was also a bad name. However, he didn't mention much about his fierce reputation. The world was shaken. Xia Ji, on the other hand, was quite calm. He spent the night in the city where the ox cart stopped, ate a bowl of noodles, and left the city. He was already in a good mood. "This time I leave. Ascend to heaven." However, Ning Xiaoyu quietly followed behind him. Women were curious cats. Once their interest was piqued, they would want to study it to the end. She always felt that this #1 demon who killed his father and king was not like that. She wanted to understand why in this world, good people were not like good people, and bad people were not like bad people. Humph. That woman actually accepted the gold and didn't do anything. However, she is really a foolish woman. If she runs away, can the people of the village escape? A man in luxurious clothes had already received the news. His expression was cold. He was Marquis Bo, the person who had surrendered to the fifth prince. He had been ordered to stop Xia Ji here. If he could capture him, he would be rewarded. If he couldn't, he could kill him. When he thought about how he had wasted his money, he couldn't help but feel furious. Guards. A trusted guard in embroidered clothes ran in. Sir, what orders do you have? The night before yesterday, we passed by a mountain village. We brought some people there and disguised ourselves as bandits. We killed that village woman's entire family. Yes, my lord. Boho thought for a while, but he still couldn't vent his anger. He called out, "Wait a minute." The imperial guard ran back and half knelt in front of him. Boho used the tea lid to gently brush the foam in the hot water in front of him. He took a sip and then slowly said, "It wasn't a mountain bandit, but that disloyal, unfilial, regicide, and patricide great demon who came to the village." The villagers were kind enough to welcome him, but the great demon was afraid that his whereabouts would be exposed, so he slaughtered the entire village and burned it to the ground. The guard was stunned. "Xia Ji, he deserves to die," Bo Ho shouted. They didn't even let off innocent people. These people really deserve to be killed. This guard was Marquis Bo's trusted aide, so his martial arts and intelligence were naturally not weak. He cupped his fists and said, "This subordinate understands." Bo Ho waved his hand. "You are so loyal. When we return, I will reward you with a few maids." "Thank you, Lord Marquis." The guard in embroidered clothes stepped forward. He was already very familiar with these things. Afternoon. The Imperial Guard returned. "Why so fast?" Bo Hochi asked. The guard in embroidered clothes, "Your subordinate went to probe the situation in the village first to prevent killing people who should not be killed. In the end, that woman's mother saw me and gave me a letter. This letter looked strange. There was a red mark on it. It didn't look like it could be made by a civilian woman who was fooling around. This subordinate was uncertain, so I brought it back for Lord Marquis to take a look." Bo Ho shook his head. "How can a foolish woman be of any importance? Let me see." The guard respectfully handed over the letter with both hands. Bo Ho opened the letter. It was empty except for a red seal. The seal was delicate, with dragons and phoenixes dancing in the air. In the middle of the seal was the word 7. "What is this?" Bo Ho stared at the seal, feeling that it was somewhat familiar. The guard in embroidered clothes waited quietly. After a long time, he saw the expression on the Marquis' face change. It was as if he had suddenly fallen from a high position, and then there was an indescribable shock. Then, he saw his Lord Marquis smile bitterly. The guard was puzzled. Could it be that the seal was really something amazing? "You didn't touch the villagers, did you?" Bo Ho asked. "Not yet," the guard replied. "Retreat everyone." The guard was shocked, but he still replied, "Yes." Then, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "Lord Marquis, please give this lowly one a palm strike. What kind of divine being is this?" "I can't say." "You may leave. You did a good job on this matter. When you come back, go to the storeroom and get 300 taels of silver." The guard did not ask any more questions and left in a hurry. In the empty room, Bo Ho smiled bitterly as he mumbled to himself, "Who are you? This wasn't sacred anymore. This is Mr. Seventh, the small group of people who can leave the kings, generals, and even the emperor outside the door." Ning Xiaoyu ran after the young man in the distance. She raised her hand and shouted, "Xia Ji, wait for me." But Xia Ji ignored her and walked faster and faster. Ning Xiaoyu suddenly froze. She sensed that the letter she had left behind had been opened and heard some of the conversation. The seal was no ordinary object. It could temporarily transmit images of its surroundings into her mind after seeing light. All 8 seals of the 8 wonders of the Confucian sect could do this. She had already heard the conversation between Bo Ho and the guard. She could not help but frown. She could understand that the noble had gone back to investigate, but it seemed that he wanted to destroy the entire village. The person who was opposing the seventh prince was definitely the fifth prince's men at this moment, because the third prince was doing something. As she thought about it, she walked quickly. Xia Ji suddenly stopped. They were already halfway up the mountain. The wind blew through the forest, blowing his hair into his ears. "Miss Ning, what are you trying to do?" Ning Xiaoyu stopped as well. Her black hair, which had a few dozen strands of white hair, fluttered in the wind. She raised her head to reveal her beautiful face and said calmly, "I'm interested in you, so I want to follow you." She then smiled again. "Someone gave me gold and asked me to assassinate you. But I've never learned how to assassinate, so I could only give up. But I'm really interested in you. Let me follow you." Xia Jile was delighted. This was an assassin with a personality. Seeing the girl's honesty, he said sincerely, "Let's go back. We're not on the same side." "What is your path?" Ning Xiaoyu asked. Xia Ji pointed to the top of his head. "What do you see?" "Heavens." Ning Xiaoyu raised her head. "I'm going up," Xia Ji said. "Are you going the same way as me?" Ning Xiaoyu was stunned for a moment before she burst into laughter. "You're really interesting." Then, she stopped smiling and asked sincerely, "If you ascend to the heavens, what are you going to do?" Xia Ji looked at her face and said, "LT has nothing to do with you." Then, his figure flashed and he flew towards the peak of the mountain at an extremely fast speed. Ning Xiaoyu soon could not see his back. Soon, Xia Ji arrived at the peak. He sat on a cliff on the highest mountain. Then, he released everything. It was as if he had unlocked himself. The three blood Buddha Dharma idols instantly appeared and put their palms together to salute him. 9 blazing suns rose into the sky, bathing him in the sunlight. The Dharma of the wise king, the Dharma of the son of heaven, and the Dharma of hell appeared one by one. His essence, qi, and spirit had already reached the most perfect stage. His state of mind had also been perfected in these few days. It's time for a breakthrough. He looked up at the sky and thought of the time when he was on Mount Meru. He sighed when he looked at the sky, "I hate the sky for being too high." Now, he could finally touch it. Even if this world wanted to suppress the 11th realm. Today, he was going to break it as well. P.I. First Order is not good, please support. Chapter 98, 92. Lightning Tribulation. Chapter 98, 92. Lightning Tribulation. In a luxurious manor in the north, 2 people were playing chess. Xia Xiaosu rejected the marriage. Humph. Duke of Cheng, don't be angry. However, the person who snorted was not angry. He immediately opened his lips and laughed. A little bitch who lost her family dares to be so stubborn. If she wants to hold on, then hold on. Duke of Cheng, I just received a report saying that the 7th prince killed the emperor and is currently fleeing in the wilderness. The man paused and his expression softened. This is not simple. Tianzi is not someone without ability. How did he escape? The nobleman frowned. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. The 5th prince is different from him. The power behind the 5th prince helped him, but Xia Ji still escaped. This kid, how high was his realm? No, this isn't a matter of whether he's high or not. Other than his cultivation level, he must have quite a few magic tools. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to escape. The Duke of Qing paced back and forth. He was still a little worried. If someone like Xia Ji went crazy and rushed into his residence, what would he? Marquis Yueming, take a random portrait and send it to Xia Xiaosu. Tell her it's Yen, or give her some face. The Duke of Cheng is still as cautious as ever, Marquis Ming praised. Then, he leaned forward and asked softly, why does the Duke of Cheng suddenly want to marry her? Her defeat is already set in stone. Even if she came to beg for a marriage alliance, she shouldn't have agreed. The Duke of Qing narrowed his eyes but did not speak. Marquis Yueming understood. Sometimes, not speaking was also an answer. Because the answer to Avicania realm was enough to explain many problems. Duke of Qing, we've known each other for 20 years, haven't we? Asked Marquis Yueming in a low voice. Marquis Yueming pointed at the ground in front of him and said in a low voice, ever since I found out that everything I So was rooted underground, I began to study it. However, I couldn't understand the situation of the world, or even the situation of the alien races. It was unreasonable and illogical. It was as if a hand was pointing at them in the dark. They did not ask about benefits or anything else. They just wanted to kill each other. What kind of logic was this? I don't think I'm stupid, but after studying it for 10 years, I still can't understand it at all. Can you give me some advice? The Duke of Qing chuckled and looked at the chessboard. Give me some pointers. I'll know how to deal with the world. The Duke of Qing's smile disappeared and he exhaled. Suddenly, he swept away all the black and white chess pieces on the chessboard. Whoosh! On the chessboard, the pieces fell to the ground. Marquis Yueming was shocked. Don't look at the chess game, said the Duke of Qing in a deep voice. Then what are you looking at? At this moment, outside the arched door of the Duke of Qing's mansion, a girl in luxurious clothes was walking a dog. She walked the dog while playing with it. The dog was pointed at by her finger, and it was tickled until it stood up and jumped twice in a comical manner. The Duke of Qing pointed at the dog and whispered, "Look at that." Marquis Yueming widened his eyes. His Adam's apple bobbed as he looked at the Duke of Qing. The two of them looked at each other, their gazes deep and serene. The Duke of Qing nodded slightly at him, then suddenly laughed and said, "This chess game isn't fun. Come, let's go see the new exotic flowers in the garden." However, he did not understand. Does the Duke of Qing mean that the world is just their plaything? What they wanted was to kill. Why? Were the 5 great clans crazy? Could it be that they really did whatever they wanted? Why aren't you leaving? Duke of Qing, a student can be a dog that barks, a dog that dances when teased by a bone. However, even dogs would guard the house and should guard the house. If the house was invaded by outsiders, the dog should pounce on them and bite them to death. But now that so many people have died, the world is in such chaos, and this dog chain is still tied up so tightly, what is the use of this student's life? It's useless. Marquis Yueming licked his lips and gritted his teeth. His eyes revealed an unconcealable ferocity. State Duke Qing suddenly stepped forward and slapped Marquis Yueming, instantly dispersing his anger and ferocity. Let's go. Yes. Teacher. Always remember that no one in this world can defy them. They are the destiny. The Duke of State Qing looked as if he was reminiscing and sighed. 20 years ago, this old man understood this principle. Today, I woke you up, so I hope you can understand it too. In the world. Xia Ji stood on the cliff with the demonic halberd stabbed into his side. In the sky. At some point in time, the wind and clouds had already stirred. The sky that was still clear a moment ago had suddenly turned gray. It was clearly spring, but the mountain-like clouds seemed to have split open. Between the cracks were purple veins that were sometimes dark and sometimes bright. They were lightning. It was as if the heavens were warning him not to take that step. That was not a step you should take. Thus, Xia Ji thrust the demonic halberd higher. This could be used as a lightning rod. When lightning struck down, it would strike the great dark heavenly halberd first, not him. The black halberd was 18 feet tall, which was very long. As a lightning rod, its effect should be quite outstanding. He carefully recalled that when he was in the imperial city, because he was uncertain about the power and influence of this world, other than asking others, he also paid special attention to the books in this area. The books did not record anything, so he went to read many strange phenomena and other strange thoughts, but none of them mentioned anything about transcending tribulation. Moreover, Fox King Huaixin had lived for 500 years, and all she knew was the Dharma. This meant that even if there were people who surpassed the Dharma plane in this world, they would be very rare. He didn't like to be reckless. But on the way here, he had already thought about it. The opportunity was fleeting. No matter what, he had to break through this realm today. Looking at the rolling lightning, Xia Ji began to wonder if he should call the eagle demon over and carry him to the stratosphere above the clouds. But it was also inappropriate. As a transmigrator, some strange knowledge flashed through Xia Ji's mind, but he didn't think that being struck by lightning was a reward from the heavens. It was just a formality. The tribulation cloud didn't feel like it was something that would grant him power as long as he could survive it. This was not the Xianxia world where tribulations were commonplace. In this world, they had never heard of the term transcending the lightning tribulation. Moreover, this cloud, it was filled with malice. His expression was very clear. If you dare to take that step, you will die today. Xia Ji did not act rashly at this moment. He thought about it and felt that the lightning rod method was not very reliable. Therefore, he put away the lightning rod and called the eagle demon. The eagle general who had carried him here had not left him. When he heard his call, he landed. Xia Ji sat on the back of the golden eagle and pointed to the sky. Go up. The golden eagle looked up at the sky and fell silent. This is also your opportunity. Xia Ji patted its shoulder. No matter who you are, you must have the courage to take the first step. The eagle drank the poisonous chicken soup, then mustered up its courage and flapped its wings to fly. Under the boundless iron-gray sky, a man and an eagle were terrifyingly small. Chapter 99, 93. The world's #1 Buddhist sect's 11th realm. Chapter 99, 93. The world's #1 Buddhist sect's 11th realm. The air was as sticky as ink. Xia Ji stood up and stepped on the golden eagle. He was already several hundred meters away from Kong Yun. The clouds were like a monster with eyes that were about to split open. Bolts of lightning flashed from time to time, filled with terrifying power. Xia Ji formed a seal with his hands, wanting to give it a try. Now, Tathagata Zen could resonate with heaven and earth, and could also make heaven and earth resonate with him. At this moment, his range could already be covered by thunderclouds. A thought. Disperse. There was no response. Disperse. There was still no response. The gods of Xia Ji had no thoughts, and 3 blood-colored Buddhas had already appeared in the air. The 3 lifetimes Buddhist contemplation could enhance his use of all spiritual techniques. He began to chant scriptures to a cloud. This wasn't a random operation. He knew that all things have spirits, and humans are the leaders of all spirits. All things have the heart to improve and the intention to transform. It's just that they don't have the opportunity. The fox could hide in the temple and listen to the chanting of the Buddha. Then, why couldn't this kind of thundercloud, which was full of spirituality and could even express malice, work? He decided to complete this unprecedented operation. Let the thunderclouds convert to my extreme. Hence. In the void, the 3 blood-red Buddhas opened their mouths at the same time and began to recite the scriptures with his spiritual imprint. Before it finished reciting, the golden eagle had already shown a state of enlightenment. It had obviously sensed this vast mental power. In front of this mental power that was as vast as a river, it felt like a small stream, so it merged into this mental power. Xia Ji read it out loud. Twice. 3 times. A strange message suddenly came into his mind. This message was like a child who was learning to speak. Buddha. Xia Ji sensed that the source of the information was the terrifying thundercloud in front of him. He nodded and sent his thoughts out. Little friend, it's me. The message replied with difficulty. Soon, more, 3,000 years, haven't seen you. Xia Ji actually understood what he meant, so he responded calmly. Little friend, I have something to do today. Come and find me next time. The message replied with great difficulty, oh. Then, it seemed to have come to a realization. So it was Buddha. Since it was Buddha, then it was fine. So what if Buddha stepped into the extraordinary realm? Since the Buddha said that he would look for him next time, then next time. Anyway, summer was coming, so he could play anytime. Xia Ji was surprised to find that the lightning in the pupils of the terrifying monster in front of him had disappeared. The clouds had begun to disperse, and the sunlight had returned. Even he couldn't believe it. After thinking for a while, he roughly understood the principle of the thundercloud. This thundercloud had probably been told that whoever wanted to break through to the extraordinary realm had to strike that person. However, the 3 lifetimes Buddhist contemplation that he had obtained had been misunderstood by thundercloud because of the mental power contained in it. This was like an antivirus software. It was set up with a principle, and then it saw a virus and wanted to kill it. However, at this moment, the virus turned into a file that it needed to live in harmony with. That was probably the case, right? These thoughts flashed through his mind. But no matter what, the terrifying lightning dissipated. Xia Ji did not delay any longer and pressed down on the golden eagle. The eagle demon understood and landed on the cliff. Xia Ji sat down cross-legged. Just to be safe, he took out the great dark heavenly halberd and stabbed it high up. Then, spirit, chi, outer God, true God, that trace of opportunity in his heart. It was as if 5 halos were being pushed and pressed by a huge force towards a certain point. It sounded like a drum. The air suddenly began to swirl. Xia Ji's existence was like a black hole in the deep sea, and all the currents began to surge toward him. The light also surged towards him, so much so that his entire body was immersed in the light, and other places had already darkened. The great golden eagle was clearly a general of the eagle tribe, but it had become a silly bird at this moment. It stood on a tree and watched this shocking scene. It did not understand what kind of power this was, but it could only feel that something was forming in this small human body. Xia Ji heard the sound of blood flowing in his body. It was the sound of the surging river beating against the banks. His blood was completely connected to his essence, chi, and spirit. It absorbed the information contained in his essence, chi, and spirit. Every tiny particle in his blood began to change. This change didn't meet any obstacles because his state of mind was perfect at this moment. He was very surprised. He now knew that he was breaking through. However, when he was breaking through, he had nothing to do. This was because all of this was happening automatically. The content of the breakthrough was also clear at a glance. It was to exchange blood. He looked at the sky leisurely. The sky was high. It had been 3 years. 3 years ago, the youth who had knelt in the throne room and bitterly said, "I am willing to be grounded in the sutra depository for 3 years," was now gritting his teeth, enduring the humiliation and pressure as he stood before the door of the 11th plane. His heart was extremely calm. His body began to expand, becoming bigger and taller. 10 feet, 20 feet. 30 feet. He was still rising. He looked down at the great dark heavenly halberd that he had stabbed into the sky, then at the eagle demon that looked like he had seen a god, and then at the mountains and rivers. However, in the eagle demon's eyes, it could only see a huge light shadow. It could not see what was inside the light shadow, but it felt great reverence in its heart. Not only was Xia Ji growing taller, but his body was also expanding. One arm after another stretched out from its body. Then, skulls were born. The mountain clouds rolled and the light flickered. Ning Xiaoyu, who was looking for Xia Ji in the distance, raised her head and saw this strange phenomenon. The spring thunderstorm suddenly came and then suddenly dispersed. Immediately after, a huge shadow filled with light appeared on the distant mountain range. She had seen a scene called a mirage in a book, so she rubbed her eyes and looked again. The giant shadow was still there. She couldn't help but frown, and waves rose in her heart. What was this? They were deep in the mountains, and almost no one had seen this scene, but why did Xia Ji need anyone to witness his growth? This was the most secluded place he had chosen so that he could break through smoothly without being disturbed. And at this moment, all the bells in the ancient temples in the world suddenly rang in unison. Dang, dang, dang. One after another. They sounded every here dash. The monks did not understand what was going on. They thought that something strange had happened and ran around to check. Even the senior monk didn't understand because he had never seen such a thing before. No one would know. Those who knew did not hear the bell. This implied that in this era, the first Dharmakaya in the world had appeared. Xia Ji didn't hear the bell either. It had 24 heads and 18 hands. It was 9 zhang tall and was filled with light and Buddha nature. A terrifying spirit flowed through its body. He didn't seem to be a warrior, but a mage. He suddenly remembered a book he had read before he transmigrated. The main character in the book had become a strength-type Kakuto monster while cultivating. Then, did he become a spiritual power? Xia Ji made the most basic judgment. After pondering for a while, he understood the terrifying power of this new body. Before his mental power was exhausted, he could use his magic tools without consuming the number of magic tools. He could also use 18 magic tools at the same time. P.S. Tomorrow's update should be at noon. Chapter 100, Chapter 194. Reborn, 1. Chapter 194. Reborn, 1. The 9 realms were Hotian, Xiantian, and then at the peak, one could condense a phantom. The 10 realms were Dharma. Crossing over the Dharma form was to change blood and create a Dharma body. Xia Ji felt the powerful mental power circulating in his body as he looked down at the mountains and rivers. The mountains and rivers were magnificent, but they were beneath his feet. All the movements in the surroundings fell into his divine sense, as if he had seen and heard it himself. However, there was a problem. How do I change back? Could it be that he had been maintaining his Dharmakaya state? He tried to mobilize his power to compress himself. After trying many times, he finally compressed this huge body and stuffed the vast power back into his original skin bag. However, during the process of compression, another strange feeling surged into his heart. This feeling told him that he had been reborn and could reconstruct a second body, but he could still return to his original body at any time. Xia Ji pondered. He roughly understood what she meant. If the body was compared to a mold. You broke free from the original mold, and now you want to return to the mold size, so you can naturally choose what kind of mold you want. It didn't matter what kind of mold it was, male or female, human or demon, animal or plant. However, because you have memories of your original, corporeal body, you can return to your original corporeal body at any time. Xia Ji didn't make any shocking choices, such as turning his second body into a woman or an animal. However, he wanted to be a person with a different appearance and temperament from himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't be considered a second body. He recalled the first time he had transmigrated to another world. He was pleasantly surprised. He was even more happy after discovering that he was a royal. He thought that he would be a proper prince in the future. He would be a noble and a hedonistic son. From then on, he would be free in the world. He would eat, drink, and play. He would do whatever he wanted. He would not fight for the position of the emperor. All his royal brothers and sisters would just raise him, a rich and idle person. He had once thought that he would be like an immortal in this bustling world, playing around in the mortal world, using the best of everything. It would be best if he could cultivate immortality. He had also thought that if he could get a fortuitous encounter, he would continue to live in seclusion and set up a scheme in the dark to make himself a dark lord who could dominate the world. Everyone knew that he was terrifying, but no one knew who he was. Then, he could maintain a carefree life on the surface. However, the golden finger did not come. However, he soon realized that reality was cruel. Then, Lady Jade died. He was framed and entered the sutra depository. The dark reality slapped him in the face, making him lonely, forbearing, and murderous. He already had the appearance of a second physical body in his heart. The light giant standing on the mountain forest disappeared, and the bells and drums in the ancient temples all over the world slowly stopped. Ning Xiaoyu saw that the light giant had disappeared. She rubbed her eyes again. It was indeed gone. Immortal. There's no description of immortals in the books. She rested her chin on her hand and stopped on a mountain path. That Prince Shenwu ran too fast, and she couldn't catch up at all. However, after a short time together and seeing his true feelings, he was definitely not the kind of demon that outsiders had rumored. On the contrary, it was those who called him a demon that had a problem with their behavior. The Confucian sect didn't forbid you from serving any ruler. The 8 wonders of the Confucian sect were the 8 great teachers of the Confucian sect. They were mysterious and possessed terrifying power that could reverse everything on the battlefield, but they would never reveal their identities until they had chosen their ruler. Even if they did, it would only be the tip of the iceberg. Ning Xiaoyu had met the 3rd prince, the 5th prince, and now the 7th prince. Other things aside, she felt that the 7th prince was quite good from a personal point of view. It would be even better if he did not have the title of Great Demon. Just as he was thinking about it, he suddenly heard a teasing voice. How lonely is it for a beautiful woman to walk alone? Why don't you let me accompany you? When Ning Xiaoyu heard this tone, she felt that her ears were dirty. She raised her head and saw a playboy. The young master was holding a folding fan. When he saw her gaze, the folding fan opened with a swoosh and he was fanning himself calmly. The wind blew his sideburns back slightly. It had to be said that he looked a little handsome. If he was really a young lady who was sightseeing, she might have agreed to go with him. The playboy smiled. I have a small house in the mountains. There are quite a few interesting gadgets in the house. I can bring you there tonight. Ning Xiaoyu's disgust rose to the extreme. She didn't even bother to call him a lecher and only said coldly, "Get lost." Compared to such a superficial playboy, she only felt that Prince Shenwu's cold wooden face was much more pleasing to the eye. She had thought that this young master would definitely be angry and pester her, and perhaps there would be evil servants coming up. However, the playboy raised his head and laughed loudly. He waved his fan and went down the mountain. The two of them passed by each other. The playboy looked at Ning Xiaoyu's cold side profile and took a deep breath. Fragrant, fragrant flowers. Women also smell good. How old is Miss? Is she married? Ning Xiaoyu was enraged. Just as she was about to make a move, the playboy tactfully ran away. Ning Xiaoyu calmed herself down and continued climbing the mountain. Casanova, who was walking down the mountain path, smiled and shook his head. Being reborn and remolding his body was indeed like being reborn. Even if the people who knew him met again, they would not know who he was. So, this could be considered as obtaining a new trump card. After he walked far away, his figure changed in a place where no one noticed. He returned to his original appearance as Prince Shenwu, and his clothes returned to the appearance of the dark golden python robe. Today, I ascended to the heavens. Since there are people in this world who want to kill me and I want to kill them, then let's just do it directly. He muttered to himself as he descended the mountain and headed south. Every time he passed by a city, he would tear down his bounty portrait on the city gate and tell the guards and patrols who were holding knives and trembling as they walked up to him. Half a month later, I'll be at the highest peak of floating Jade Mountain. The people who want to kill me will come. The news spread like wings to the cities on the north bank of the river at an extremely fast speed. Originally, many people were still looking for this ferocious demon who was fleeing in all directions and had killed his father and king. Now, they did not expect this ferocious demon to jump out on its own. Some mocked, some thought that this great demon thought that he could not escape and wanted to kill himself in a glorious way, some were cautious, some were puzzled, and so on. But no matter what kind of person, no matter what they thought, Xia Ji had already climbed up floating Jade Mountain. Floating on Yushan Mountain, looking south at the waves of the river, overlooking the mountains and mountains in the north. Climbing to the top, looking at the world. Chapter 101, Chapter 101, 95. Decisive Killing, 1. Chapter 101, 95. Decisive Killing, 1. Several days later. In a dark palace. Two indistinct figures sat opposite each other. The conversation was brief. Xia Ji has gone up floating Jade Mountain. Tell everyone who wants to kill him to go. You're looking for me for this. He's a member of your Su family, so I'm asking you if you still want this toy. It's just an abandoned child. Besides, there's still a woman. I don't want this. Your Zhou family can play with her however they want. The conversation stopped abruptly. Two blurry figures disappeared. The Palace of Darkness also disappeared. Everything ended here. It was as if it had never appeared. In summer, on the peak of the mountain. Lin Feng closed his eyes and sat cross-legged. The 18-foot-long dark heavenly halberd was stuck at his side. This demonic halberd looked like an ordinary halberd, and it no longer had the demonic aura that Xia Ji had when he first saw it in the palace. However, it was not weak, but it had become deeper and more terrifying. It was a spirit embryo and Xia Ji was its mother. In these few short months, it had eaten a lot of flesh and blood, and had a big meal. When Xia Ji broke through to the 11th realm, it also benefited from it. Although it had not given birth yet, it was connected to its mother telepathically, just like Xia Ji's hands and feet. As long as it was not far away, Qi could be directly injected into it. In other words, this great dark heavenly halberd had already surpassed the scope of ordinary demon weapons. As the saying goes, when one person attains the Tao, chickens and dogs ascend to heaven. Xia Ji had become the first Dharmakaya in the world. The mountain path continued down endlessly, followed by layers and layers of mountains. A figure suddenly appeared at the entrance. Laughter followed. How can a king and father murderer, a disloyal and unjust person, have the right to challenge the world? The figure appeared to be a swordsman, holding a 3-foot-long sword. The sword had not been unsheathed yet, and the sheath was decorated with 8 treasures and strange pearls, shining brightly in the sky. The swordsman walked over. He did not come alone. Behind him were many righteous swordsmen who were filled with righteous indignation, about 100 people. Every single one of these 100 people had vigorous blood chi, calm breathing, and steady genuine chi. Clearly, they were all experts. If they weren't experts, who would dare to come here? However, even if they were masters, they knew that they were no match for a legend, so they joined forces and hid their goals. Some of them wanted to fish in troubled waters. If this Prince Shenwu had exhausted all his strength and was still breathing, they would be able to make a move at the critical moment. That would truly make their name known in the martial world. Some of them wanted to be spectators and see how powerful and skilled Prince Shenwu was. Some were calm on the surface, but they were gloating in their hearts. It was a very comfortable thing to be able to see a legend go from arrogance to despair and then fall. Who hadn't been young before? Who didn't want to be arrogant? However, even if he wanted to do it, he still laughed. He felt that being arrogant was just stupid. No one could be arrogant in this world. Therefore, this Prince Shenwu was destined to die because this world could not tolerate such an arrogant and despotic person. No one in the world has ever dared to be so arrogant. Warriors need to reflect on themselves and guard against arrogance and impatience. Only then can they improve. Xia Ji, do you think that the world is small just because you've received the inheritance, the enlightenment, and the magic tool? Why don't you think about how capable you are? In the past, the 6-armed Azura king was so powerful that he was almost a god. Even he didn't dare to challenge the world. You're much weaker than him. What a pity. Xia Ji wasn't angry, nor did he open his eyes. One only said that those who wanted to kill me would come here. When did I say that I wanted to challenge the world? Someone in the crowd laughed. This prince was afraid. While they were conversing, many people walked over from the foot of the mountain. Some were dressed in strange clothes and were obviously not from the righteous path. Some were wearing bamboo hats to hide their identities. Everyone was very sensitive to each other's smell and quickly stood apart. Fortunately, the summit of Floating Jade Mountain was very wide. The cliffs and mountain paths were arranged in layers like terraces. Xia Ji sat at the highest point, while the others were arranged in a row. The more people there were, the bolder they became. More and more people spoke. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It was very noisy. However, a calm voice sounded, suppressing all the noise. Since you're here, come up. Disloyal and unjust people will naturally be destroyed by experts. I'm only here to see how evil people like you will receive retribution. The swordsman from before was hugging his sword and responding loudly. Xia Ji raised his right hand slightly, and the great dark heavenly halberd sensed it and woke up from its slumber. Po2, shoot. A bolt of lightning like a wild python crossed 1,000 feet. The tip of the halberd and the 2 crescent moons stabbed into the chest of the person who spoke, breaking through his back. Before anyone could react, it had already brought him flying out. By the time the others came back to their senses, they only heard a bang. The person who spoke had been nailed to a huge rock not far away by the halberd. His internal organs had been shattered by the demonic chi and force in the halberd. The great dark heavenly halberd had absorbed his blood essence very carefully, so it was impossible to tell from the outside. Xia Ji retracted his hand, and the halberd flew back and landed on the ground. A calm voice rang out. It's just hearsay. It's sad. He paused. Come on up. You're a legend, someone hiding in the crowd said. But you're bullying the younger generation. There's naturally someone to deal with you. Why do you have to vent your anger on us? Let me warn you, there's always someone better than you. Xia Ji raised his hand, and the black halberd shot out excitedly. A beam of black light pierced through everything, stabbing a string of people and shooting into the sky. The cultivators who were blocking the person who spoke were also brought up. Before the speaker could finish his sentence, his body was shattered by the demonic chi from the tip of the halberd. His eyes were still filled with fear. The black halberd returned to its original position. Continue, Xia Ji said lightly. The other person had just said, "You're much weaker than the six-armed Azura king." When he saw the attack, he hurriedly shut his mouth. But it was too late. The black halberd was like a ferocious beast with a life of its own. If anyone dared to act presumptuously in front of its mother, it would immediately dash out and kill them at lightning speed. Blood exploded in the sky again, and a few more corpses fell. The black halberd stabbed into Xia Ji's side again. The youth kept his eyes closed because these people were not worth him opening his eyes to deal with. Dark red blood dripped down from the black halberd, but it was only 2 to 3 inches before it was completely absorbed like water entering a sponge. On the summit of floating Jade Mountain, all these noisy voices had disappeared. "Since you're here," Xia Ji said slowly, "you're all people who want to kill me. However, you are mistaken about one thing. I am not challenging the world, but I want the world to know how high the sky is. Only when you understand reverence will you shut your mouth." As he spoke, he raised his hand. His 5 fingers were floating, and the black halberd let out an excited buzzing sound. Black gas was like a demon snake coiling around the tip of the halberd, the crescent moon, and the halberd shaft. The black halberd broke through the ground and soared into the air. The onlookers suddenly sensed the terrifying baleful aura that seemed to have materialized. They turned around and fled frantically. Part 9 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.